All right, far too much data collection for me over the last few days. This has been a a lot of work from me. But I have something interesting, and I actually think I can plummet for some more interesting things in the future. Which is now that I've input all these games in, it will be easy for me to find positions at all points in the game when there is only one move that wins or one move that ties, or potentially two or three moves that win or tie, and create a series of puzzles. And I could do this whenever, and it wouldn't take a ton of work at this point. I wish I had better graphics to put out, so I may wait until we have better graphics for that before doing it. But like in chess, there's typically puzzle books, and there's fun games like Puzzle Rush type things, which is the chess.com version, but we hate chess.com. So like Blitz Tactics has a version where you try to solve as many puzzles as you can in a limited period of time, and you get bonus points for streaks, and it can be fun and a nice thing to do. And I think it could be a fun thing to do with Triple Triad as well. And some parts of that I don't know how I'd put together, but others I think would be very put togetherable. And so potentially a nice idea down the road. That said, we are going to be using this for open rankings of players in 2021. In general, 2021 had more players than 2022. The boom of the return brought in a lot of talent, and much of that talent has stayed, but a fair chunk of it left. This led to more players in weekly opens. Now in 2023, we're starting to see four rounders again, but for a while we were seeing three rounders. And in general, the fewer rounds there are, the harder it is to have high win rates because so few players in the field can play over, only players that make the finals in a 3 round tournament have a better record than 50%. So it's just very hard to have win rates that are very high. And in 4 round tournaments, a much higher percentage of the crop can have high win rates. So in these 2021 rankings, you're going to see much higher win rates than you did in 2022. I also think the quality will be lower. We're looking at only the top of the field, so that may not be visibly apparent. But I think the players that have stuck around not only tend to be stronger players, but also are playing better. So it is harder and harder to grab wins against the top end of the field. This is not to discredit what we're going to see here in 2021, but it is to say I think it's getting tougher and tougher to win games. And kudos to players that still do, because it's hard to snag wins at all in the tournaments being considered for this, the weekly open and the once a year monthly fun GB. Yeah, I guess that's all to say here. Will we have last list? We had 9 players. This we will in fact have more players. But let's look at the qualifications for making this list. First of all, quality is a metric I've worked on. I talked about it last time. It is very hard to maintain a score over 0 for many games. In 2022, only 9 players achieved this. In 2021, feels a little weird to do this out of order, but it's what I did. 13 players qualified, which is of course slightly more, though more players were playing. And in 2021, only one player averaged more than 10 a game in quality. In fact, only one player averaged more than 9 a game in quality. And in 2022, I think 4 players averaged over 10 in quality. 3 or 4. So I think you really did see the top end play clearly better in 2022. I also set a games requirement of 15. I strongly considered going higher, but 2021 was a shortened year. There was only a quarter of it. Strangely, there were basically the exact same number of games in these tournaments in 2021 as 2022, helped by there being more rounds, more activity, and specifically a lot more rounds in the monthly GB, a lot more people to play, which really added up the game count. That said, I felt in the shortened year having a requirement of 15 was fair. I do feel bad for exactly Doom Train, who started really well, was clearly over a quality score of 0, broke 15 games played, and fell off at the end of the year to just miss. So I want to say Doom Train was clearly a player who was during this period of time playing worthy of making this list, but with the exact requirements I did, happened not to make it. There are a few other players who would have been cut if I set the higher game requirement, and then I would be shouting out those here because there were a few that very much deserved to make it. but wouldn't due to a higher game requirement. I did include them. I didn't find a way to be consistent on requirements that would include Doom Train, but I think he played great in 2021. So let's do our list. In 13th place, we have DJ. He had a 50% win rate, again showing you can play really well, and in elimination tournaments, it's just really hard to get win rates higher than 50% or even at 50%. This is also to say DJ was playing awesome in late 2021. There's a very good reason he made the semifinals of SE Nephilim, a mostly 2021 tournament. He played 34 games, which is 5th, but I will say much of the crowd played between 27 and 34, so 5th is just like 7 games off 10th or so. It's quite close. I'm going to try to point out when stuff is quite close. In general, DJ played really well, and the other people here, I think, played a little better. He consistently played good games, and you could probably get him as high as 11th. You can see he's 10th on a quality metric, but I think overall the others had a few more things going for them in these open random games that we're evaluating here. Did I say this is all open randoms? I think the title card hopefully showed that, but okay. In 12th, we have Addy. Addy qualifies despite having an under 50% win rate. He was a very solid player, though, tied a lot of games, and played really well in the ties, leading to not a huge quality score, but a really nice flawless and invincible score here over a very solid chunk of games. Both DJ and Addy were better in 2021. In general, this is the 2021 list, so most people in the middle and bottom of this list will have been better in 2021. Similarly, if you look at the 2022 list, most people middle and bottom of that list were better in 2022. So that is not very telling, but And Addy has come on strong in 2023. I think he has a very good shot to not just make the list in 2023, but make it in significantly better standing than he did here. In 11th, we have Wavy. Wavy mostly dropped off playing events after 2021, so he was clearly much better in it. The quality score is the lowest making the list, but the invincible and flawless scores, invincible being what percentage of games were you ever in a lost position, basically, though it's the opposite of that. So 72.4% means was never in a lost position, and 72% of games was in a lost position in 28%. This is a very high score. His flawless score, meaning not only no losing mistakes, but no missing stuff when there was a winning possibility, is 5th on this list, though very much in a pack of close scores. So, 5th might be closer to like 9th than it is to 4th or 3rd, that can happen. Just played really well. And again, you can see a player that played really, really well. Again, over 50% flawless is very strong. And still only winning about 50% of games, and in a time when it was easier to pick up wins. It's tough to win games out there. Inconsistent game to game. Then we have Blizzard. And Blizzard started really, really hot. He ended kind of poor. He had a poor monthly GB, didn't put in a lot of effort, didn't get a lot of games done. But till then, he was doing fantastic in the chat tournaments. He came second in the first one, beating really strong players on the way there. He's got a very good win rate here, good number of games played, very kind of steadily around 10th in every category available. You can see he's got a clear jump in quality from what we've been looking at. Generally, we've been looking at people who scored between 0 and 2 so far, in fact, entirely. And Blizzard is a bit over 3. And in fact, if not for that monthly GB, would have been around +5. So, varied in quality of game to game, but I think a really nice showing by Blizzard. Not playing a ton of events, but going deep enough that he still got a lot of games played. Really impressed by Blizzard stuff. A player that, when he does play, is very promising. In 9th, we have Cool Spot, a player who played one event and disappeared, but it was an event that had a lot of games to play, and he played many of them. And his numbers here are really, really good. That quality of 6.9 in 5th is remarkable, though it should be noted 4 of the 13 players are between 6 and 7 in quality. So if you subtracted just a point off that, easily within any kind of margin of error, he would drop to 8th. That said, played really, really well. I forget what place he came in the monthly GB, but I think his performance in it was better than the place he actually finished. Just played really good triple triad. I said earlier that 50% flawless was a really high rate. You can see again, it is a very high rate. Wavy had, I think that was Wavy, had really nice numbers there. In 8th place, we have Yevon. And Yevon might be the most controversial pick on the list because Yevon could kind of go anywhere. If you look at those top numbers, he crushed that monthly GB. He won a ton of games. He ended up coming very close second. Just incredibly high win rate. Whether you look at kind of win rate including ties, which is what the GB did, and he scored very well there, or just win to loss ratio, either way, one of the most winning players of 2021. On the other hand, the underlying numbers were really shaky. And part of it is that while game to game he had medium consistency, tournament to tournament, some tournaments he was really poor, some tournaments he was excellent. But even with that all considered, the monthly GB, his underlying numbers did not pop out at me. Now, maybe he's doing things they don't evaluate properly. That is very plausible. What it did suggest to me is his results exceeded his actual performance. That he played well, but his results made it look like it was spectacular. Because you can see from his results, one of the top players on this list. Like, I just robbed him, a top 5 finish, if not higher. If you look at kind of the indicators of underlying quality, he was lost in a ton of games that tournament, but his opponents couldn't close it out, and he'd often win those games. And that clearly speaks to him doing something well, but it is a worrisome sign. Similarly, his flawless and quality scores are very low for this list. So really curious results in 2021. And if you watch my video of how he played the monthly GB, kind of celebrating how well he played in it, maybe there's stuff to notice of how he outperformed his underlying numbers. I think, for instance, his use of aggressive side starters, meaning side starters without looking to build a defensive wall, like not having a maximum number facing 5, but instead saying, you can't play safely in the squares next to this, I control those squares, and because you're not going to play there, maybe next turn I'll play in one of them, and you won't really have the other to play in. Proved a very effective strategy, and while his games were kind of messy coming from it, he did handle the complications better than his opponents. Now, for me, I tend to be an underlying stat guy. I'm an expected goals guy in soccer, if that means anything to you. I'm a where's your shot distribution in basketball guy, and what's your efficiency. To me, these numbers indicate he played well and got very lucky as well. But to you, it may indicate he played great, and my numbers just aren't capable of representing that. In 7th place, we have Midas. And Midas, you'll see, is 3rd on quality, though again, it's like he's closer to, 8th than he is to 2nd there, I think. No, he's pretty close to 2nd. He's closer to 8th than he is to 1st. But, great quality score, not that many games played, good win rate. The numbers other than quality indicate very strong, but maybe not as strong as the quality. But the quality indicates putting a lot of pressure on his opponents. Yeah, Midas played really well in 2021. He had a very poor 2022. He didn't play much, and when he didn't play very well. But 2021 looks more like what we expect out of Midas. And this was also at the same time period of his best tournament result, making the finals of Nephilim. In 6th place, we have Turds. He came 1st in 2022, and I think was the clear pick for 1st. So this was a somewhat poor showing. One thing I was surprised by is I thought in the monthly GB it played really well, and when I checked it, out of like 20 games, like 4 of them he played flawlessly. Or 5. It was a much lower rate than I expected, and that really pulled down his numbers. That said, his numbers are great. High win rates, ton of games played. Consistently 7th or 8th in performance across the board, but usually like right in a pack of people with similar scores where he happens to be at the bottom of a pack, but like is closer to 5th than to 11th, right? And he also did it over a large number of games. I think 6th place feels about right, but his score in 2022 is so much better. His quality is almost double in 2022 what it is here, and his other numbers are mostly better, though we'll get to the one that isn't in a little bit. In fifth place, we have Chickeny. Insane win rates, insane level of play. The quality measure doesn't love him as much, but everything else here does. I thought Chickeny was playing great. I remember a match against him in a chat tournament and just thinking, like, he doesn't make mistakes. What am I supposed to do? He also said he was thinking the same thing about me, and he got a bad random, and I got through on that one. But, like, these numbers are nuts. Phenomenal numbers. He was the reason I set the requirement at 15 games rather than 25. There's an argument for putting him higher, but I think with so few games played, it's just not enough of a sample. People who maintained play over lots of tournaments, it's harder to maintain that motivation. It also means you're more likely to have faced varied rule sets, so to have really proven yourself across rule sets. Playing more games means you're more likely to have faced an even distribution of opponents, so less likely to have gotten lucky on who your opponents were. So I do think, being clear last year in games played is a real detriment to Chickeny's case, and I couldn't push him higher. But man, did he play great. He just plays very precisely, very well. I think something the quality measure gets at, and I think genuinely the biggest weakness in Chickeny's play, is I think he often doesn't find particularly good starters. I think relative to other players of his caliber, he finds relatively weak starters, but then plays tremendously the rest of the game. And I think the quality measure might be indicating that, where the invincible and flawless measures won't really notice that, because it's not like he's playing a starter that loses on the spot or misses a win, but he is playing a starter, I think, that applies somewhat less pressure than others might. Chickeny's a phenomenal player. There's a good case. My voice is dying. Sorry. There's a good case that he is, was playing the best triple try, or very close to the best triple triad on the site. In fourth, we have Tezuka. Tezuka is our second player to have made the top of both lists for both years. Turds was our first that we've seen, and Tezuka is our second. Everyone else we'll see here also made the other list. Really high win rates, really good underlying numbers. One of those people right around 6, +6 in quality. He was +3-ish in quality in 2022. So he was better here in 2021 in these random games. And over a big enough sample, I feel comfortable saying I think he was playing better randoms. Obviously, he will certainly take playing better in tournaments in 2022, because he finally got a title, and a well-deserved one. But his random play was really good in 2021. I was expecting him to land kind of similarly as a good but not exceptional random player, but these scores are tremendous. I wasn't sure about the Chickeny versus Tezuka order, and 31 games may not seem that much more than 18, but as I was kind of deciding between games requirements of 15 or 25, the difference between 31 and 18 seemed pretty big, and it is almost double. So I ended up giving it to Tezuka, but you could go either way here. Tezuka played awesome. In third place, we have Delial, one of only 2 players to make the top 3 of both years. Quite high win rates, but his underlying numbers are even better than his win rates. I think in general, he had a lot of matches against top tier opponents, kind of thing. Second in games played, so less likely to have a weird distribution, but also the more games you played usually came from getting further in tournaments, so usually means you face tougher competition. Players with fewer games played in general will have faced weaker competition than players with more games played. And of course, these numbers are all fantastic, but he was even better in 2022. These numbers are really good. His numbers there, even better. +7.8 in quality in 2022. He's over 10 in quality on average per game. That's a pretty huge gap. So this is to say he was really good here, even better in 2022. Second, we have Akiyama. Now, Akiyama would look even better if we ignored the first 5 or so chat tournaments, because he was pretty rough in those. It took him until chat tournament 7, I think, to get over 0 as a quality measure. like 5 or 6 chat tournaments in, he was at a -2, I think, and not playing all that well. But that he could still average a +8.5 after that start speaks to him playing tremendously well, particularly in the last 2 months of the year. Really high win rates, especially if you just do win-loss ratio, and just because he didn't lose very much, and basically all his losses were at the start of the return. Played a ton of games, played fantastically well throughout, and I think is clearly deserving of second place here. It's always boring when I give myself a win, but I think this is pretty comfortable. I guess the most interesting thing here is my invincible number is like within 0.1 of my invincible number in 2022. My flawless number was significantly better in 2022, about 15% better, and my quality is about a point better in 2021. I think overall that suggests I played better in 2022, but my win rate is way, way higher in 2021. And that just speaks to how much harder it is to win games at this point in time than it was then. That said, obviously, I'm pretty proud of this. These are very good numbers to maintain for 50 games, but hopefully I can do even better. So to conclude, there were 5 players who made both lists: Akiyama, Delial, Tezuka, Turds, and Was Up. I would have correctly predicted 4 of those. I wouldn't have been sure if Tezuka would make it both years, but he did, and in fact made it both years comfortably, and made it in 2021 very comfortably. If you look at the 5 players, I think Tezuka was better in 2021. Akiyama and I are pretty similar across the years. Maybe Akiyama a tad better in 21, me a tad better in 2022, but pretty similar. Delial clearly better in 2022, and Turds much better in 2022. So for the people that we can directly compare at the top end, 4 of these players were over +10, I think, in 2022. Only 1 was in 2021, and only 1 was close to being so. And yet, despite generally this list being better in 2022, by quality of play, all of them had higher win rates in 2021, except I've given 2 win rates for each player. Turd's win rate was higher in 2021, but his win ratio was higher in 2022. But he played so much better in 2022 to get that. So to conclude, I do think it was easier to pick up wins in 2021. This is not very important in some general sense, but it is to say it's just really hard to pick up wins at this point. There's a good chance, if we're playing an 8-player tournament, you've got 50% chance, a bunch of these are playing most tournaments, to be facing one of these 5 players, or, someone else ridiculously good. It's just really hard to win games. Really hard to win games. And so winning any games at all should be taken as kind of a major feat at this point. But hopefully this list and this exploration was interesting, and I hope to be able to find other uses for having done all the statistical nonsense than one ranking video. And I think the best use will be that I can quickly search for positions to make puzzles from. So let me know if you think that's a good idea, if you'd be interested in some kind of collection of puzzles to look at, especially if the graphics were better, if it had proper cards and stuff, if that would be interesting to you. Or I don't know that we have the programming to set this up, but some kind of game of trying to solve as many puzzles as you can in a limited amount of time. And they could be easy puzzles. They could be 2 moves left in the game, and just stuff you can kind of do quickly, but trying to be as fast and accurate as possible. Or tougher puzzles, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 moves left, 8 moves left, find the best starter. I can pretty quickly identify instances of whatever's wanted in that regard, and maybe make interesting puzzles. Could even potentially sort by structure. Could find, this would take some work, but could find every position that has 5 moves left from a Q, or from a T, or from a Z, and just practicing those structures and just calculating tons of examples of those structures. Maybe particularly ones where there's only 1 winner, 1 tie, but maybe just a ton of them in general. That wouldn't be that hard for me to pull out at this point. So hopefully there's interesting stuff to be done with this.